What's up, Sports Spectrum? It's Matt Forte with Jason Romano here, my wise counsel, and we have the pleasure of sitting with Tommy Edman, the World Series champion here.
World Series champion.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Walk us through that, man. I mean, I've never played in a Super Bowl. I've been in the playoffs, but nothing as big as that type of stage. How was that? What was the feeling like?
Yeah, it was, everybody always says it. It's what you always dream about as a little kid. And you can kind of picture yourself in those moments. But I think when you actually get there, the weight of everything kind of hits you. And I think playing in those games, it was definitely like a different kind of emotion that I'd felt. I felt more emotion playing those games than I really ever had playing baseball before. And just to go out on top the way we did, it was truly special.
So, I mean, y'all don't get it. I'm sitting here, Tommy's a baller. Like, you are a utility player. Like, you can play outfield, infield, can do it all. You got a Golden Glove back in 21. And, man, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the journey to the World Series. I mean, you didn't start out with the Dodgers. Talk about that, because I think you started off with the Cardinals, and you had a wrist injury, or had to have surgery.
That's right. I had the wrist surgery last October, and it was a really weird injury where it was kind of unique in that not many baseball players had gotten it before, so they didn't necessarily know when I was going to be back. My surgeon initially estimated I'll be back for spring training, and I kept kind of getting delayed a little bit. I kept trying to swing, and it would continue to hurt, and I had a couple of setbacks and got to the point in May where I was kind of thinking, like, all right, I just want to get on the field at some point this year. And fortunately, in May, it turned a corner to where it started to feel better as I swung with a little bit more force and seeing faster velocity. And I was getting ready to go on a rehab assignment end of June, and then I ended up spraining my ankle. So I was out for another few weeks after that and tried to get on rehab, and the ankle still didn't quite feel right. And I was injured at the time of the trade deadline, and since I wasn't really contributing to the Cardinals because obviously being injured, I ended up getting traded over to LA. So it's kind of, I felt like almost because of those injuries that I ended up getting traded to the Dodgers, and fortunately that led to a great postseason and us winning the championship. So now looking back on that, I can kind of see, what God's plan was all along. It seemed very frustrating at the time, but it led to even greater plans than I could have imagined.
Yeah, we never know God's plan, right? That's why we have to kind of take into context, like, hearing God's voice. Because if you look back a year before, we got wrist surgery, we got delayed, a setback in recovery, and that can I know from experience, when you're injured and you're trying to make a comeback, you're trying to speed it up, really, because you want to get out there and perform, and you want to produce. And in the sports business, when you aren't producing, things happen. Like, you either get cut or you get traded, or the media gets on you and all kind of stuff. But how important is it to focus on God's plan for your life than to kind of try to see your own path and be disappointed when development gets delayed?
Yeah, there's a lot of frustration involved, for sure. There's a lot of times when you kind of hear the outside voices, the distractions, not only from other people, but also from in your own head too. You're kind of questioning yourself, like, hey, am I going to get back to where I was before? People on the outside are questioning that as well. But I think to be able to rely on God during those times and have that inner peace, being like, okay, I know God's got a plan for my season, and not just the season, but just understanding that it's not necessarily about the performance on the field, but our identity as a son of God, and a follower of Jesus, and knowing that there's ways that I can have faith to God other than just my performance on the field, mm-hmm. whether that's being supportive of my teammates, being a good husband and father. And I think having that freedom of mind, knowing that it doesn't necessarily rely on me getting back on the field and playing as well as I possibly could, helped me maintain, a good attitude throughout the whole recovery. And I think having a good mindset as you're recovering kind of helps recover. If you're stressed the whole time, there's things that can happen in your body that kind of end up getting delayed. So, having that inner peace, I think, certainly helped during that frustrating time.
Yeah, you mentioned mindset, and that stuck out to me just now, because you have to have a different mindset to be traded, basically mid-season or at the end of the trade deadline, and then to go to a team and actually, I mean, you heavily contributed. You were NLCS MVP, and was able to win, take and help the Dodgers into a World Series. So, but at that time, I've seen it where it's hard to transition to a new team in general. The fear of the unknown. I don't know any of the guys, or maybe I do know somebody, but not the camaraderie yet in the clubhouse. I almost said locker room. Clubhouse is baseball. But the camaraderie there, like, there's a lot of fear of the unknown. So walk us through, like, how did you remain solid, or continue to have a solid foundation with your family too, because that's a lot of transition of moving across the country and moving parts with that, and how did that work with that?
It takes a little bit for sure. Those first few weeks going to a new team. I'd been with St. Louis from the time I got drafted in 2016, so I was there for 8 years. So I'd gotten very familiar with everybody there, the players, the staff, and then my wife had gotten close with the wives and girlfriends on the team as well. So it was a transition for us both. But fortunately, going to LA, it was we grew up in San Diego, so being 2 hours from home, it was a little bit like a homecoming. But so that made things a little bit easier. But those first few weeks, you're still meeting everybody, kind of trying to feel everybody out, see who's see who you can kind of mess with. You gotta almost like watch yourself around a little bit. Not that I'm really messing around with too many people anyways, and then the other big part of it too is figuring out who your brothers in Christ are, and fortunately we had a great group in LA. I think I got traded on like a Wednesday, and then I was able to go to a chapel on like Saturday. So I almost immediately had that connection with those guys right away. And there's another guy, Michael Kopech, who got traded at the deadline as well. So we were kind of in the same situation, and we kind of bonded over that. And it took a few weeks for sure, just getting comfortable around everybody and being able to, I don't know, I mean, just feel comfortable playing and getting my preparation and routine and everything like that. But everybody there was very welcoming and did a great job of helping make that transition pretty seamless. So I was fortunate in that regard, and just grateful for that organization.
I haven't started my Major League Baseball run yet, but I've never been teammates with you or anything. But from our knowing each other right now, you seem like a pretty likable guy. Yeah. And what if there's someone who is not used to maybe they're super introverted, they're not used to being kind of outgoing, or going into a situation like you did? How important is it to create community and have someone to lean on or to identify with, finding your brothers in Christ in a situation like that? Because we know how bad isolation is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it's super important. And that's something I've kind of started to realize over the past few years. I think since COVID, because COVID promoted so much isolation, and just, obviously being alone is not good. You get some crazy thoughts, and the devil can really attack you when you're alone. So I think it's the most important thing. And for me, I'm honestly kind of an introverted person. Like, I almost have to go outside my comfort zone a little bit to go, have conversations and meet new people. But that's something I've almost kind of tried to make a priority the last couple of years is, creating that community, forcing myself to go outside and outside my comfort zone and have deep conversations with people, not just surface level, but just really talk to people who you can have real life conversations about, talk about our faith and things we're struggling with. But it can be tough for sure. That's kind of what our society is almost like as a whole. It promotes like individualism and everybody kind of fending for themselves. But I think as a follower of Christ, especially, community isn't just like a little extra thing you can add on, but it's one of the most important things you can do.
Speaking of community, my man Jay Nice is right here.
Yeah.
He's got a question for you.
I do. I'm big on moments, Tommy. I know you were on Sports Spectrum a couple of years ago, and we sat at this conference and kind of talked through some things. But the moments that you experienced just in that past last month, I should say, of playing with the Dodgers in the postseason, it went to another level. Like with the Mets, like you were hitting in every game. You won the NLCS MVP. So I'm going to ask you two moments. The first is Game 6 in LA. And it's that moment when you hit the home run and you realize, like, this could, I mean, I could see that smile on your face running around the bases like, okay, like we're real close here to being, National League champions and going to the World Series. Describe that moment, because a lot of athletes do not get a chance to be on that big of a stage and hit that big of a home run and then be named. And you're the NLCS MVP. You got all these superstars. You got Shohei and Mookie Betts, and you're up on the stage and they're presenting you, the guy who just came a couple months ago with this trophy. I would love to have you just kind of explain that moment for all of us.
Yeah, kind of like I was saying earlier, it's an emotion I'd never really felt on the baseball field before. I think with how long the season is, 162 games, I really try to like stay level-headed. I know some guys can do it. Some guys have big ups and downs. Not necessarily that that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Right.
But for me, I just can't do it. I can't like get like way high. Have those big outbursts of emotion. And what you saw, I just like screamed around first base, and that was a huge outburst of emotion for me.
Is that like the most emotional you've ever been?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah?
Had to have been, yeah.
Yeah.
But, and then after that, our team had been playing so well. It was kind of one of those things throughout the postseason where, like, no matter what the score was, like, we just had all the confidence in the world that we were going to win that game. We got, even in the game that we clinched in the World Series, we were down 5-0. And
I was going to ask you about that one too.
Yeah.
Like at that point, you could easily have said, okay, we'll just go back to LA and try game 6. And it's like, nope, you still had confidence that you could come back from 5-0 down.
Yeah. And I think that just kind of spoke to our team and the resilience we had. We had a bunch of, a lot of experience on that team and a lot of just really like resilient, gritty dudes. And just having the confidence as well too, and I think I've been parts of teams kind of like that in the past where we just keep on fighting regardless. But, I don't think that I had ever been a part of a team that was to that degree.
Yeah.
So I think once we got up in game 6, it was kind of like, okay, we're winning this thing. And just start thinking about the World Series. And, that's what I always dream about.
Yeah.
To be able to be on that stage and have contributed like I did, I didn't really realize that I was going to win the MVP until Kike actually came over to me in like the 6th or 7th inning, and he's like, "What's up, MVP? You ready to go to the World Series?" And it kind of clicked in my head. I was like, "Oh wait, I've had a really good series. Like I got a chance to."
Yeah.
Because we'd had so many guys. Like I think Muncy had reached base like 14 times in a row, and Shohei had a bunch of big homers. So I was kind of thinking like all those guys could have won it, but. We really did have a few guys who could have won MVP. We scored I think we set the record for most runs scored in a series or something like that.
You did. I told you before we started, I am a New York Mets fan.
Yeah.
So I was sad.
I was like, you crushed Jason's dream.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
He didn't crush my dream. I'm a mature man now. I can handle it. But I told Tommy I was rooting for Tommy Edman as well.
Yeah.
So I'm like watching the Mets, wanting them to win so bad. But then you hit the homer, and my wife's like, "Why are you not mad right now?" I said, "Because Tommy's my guy." I said, "We love him. He's part of PAO. He's been on Sports Spectrum. It couldn't happen to a better dude." So, it was a little less of a painful experience. I was just happy because the Mets won the most games and gave you guys a better, in some ways, a better series than the Yankees. So I was okay with that.
Yeah, they were hot. The Mets they had a good team. They had Lindor and Pete had a great postseason. And,
yeah.
All 3 series were tough. Honestly.
They were. Yeah.
I know that we won 4-1.
Padres great too.
Yeah, that Padres, we were down 2-1 in that first round. And, it didn't look great for us, but kind of like I was saying, we got that gritty group that just kept on fighting back.
Matt, I wanted to say too, I don't know if you remember Game 1. It's one of the great postseason sporting events, forget baseball games, you'll ever watch. And Freddie Freeman hits the walk-off grand slam, and that's another moment. We could sit here and talk about moments all day.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure for the audience that we mentioned that game as well, and the fact that Tommy scored the game-winning run in the clincher in Game 5 at Yankee Stadium. So pretty cool things that he just got to experience here over the last few months.
Yeah, so I'm sitting next to a baller, man.
Yes, you are.
Y'all don't realize who I'm sitting next to. But
yes, you are.
I wanted to talk a little bit about God and how he's ready to move. When God is ready to move in our lives and how quickly those things can change. Because I think you are a testament of that. If we look back, if we look in the Bible with Moses, and there's a point in time where he is being educated under Egyptian he's in the palace and all of that, and he's got this education, but he knows who he is still. And two Hebrews are fighting and arguing, but he a day before, had killed someone, had murdered an Egyptian for beating a Hebrew. And then he goes and gets cast out, and he's out for like 40 years until God encounters him. He's being developed in that moment. Or like when the Israelites are wandering around the desert for 40 years until God is ready to move, until they're ready to go into the promised land. So there's always this development period. Did you feel like that when you had wrist surgery and that kind of fear the unknown time before leading up to where it's like, okay, I'm able to play, I'm healthy now, and I'm on this team. Oh, this team is making a run. Man, God is moving.
Yeah. I think so. And I think even going back further, like going back to when I, first got called up back in 2019. I know I grew up in the church. I'll kind of give a little background, but grew up in the church, and my parents and family have very strong faith. And I think most people deal with this when you grow up in the church is when you go on your own for the first time, you're going to have to rediscover that for yourself. So going through college and the minors, I had it kind of in the back of my heart. I knew that I was a Christian, and I believe that Jesus died for my sins, but to actually pursue Jesus wasn't something I had really been at the forefront of my mind yet. And I got called up in 2019, and I had a bunch of great leaders on that team, guys like Adam Wainwright and Matt Wieters, who really set the tone in the clubhouse. They made it easy to dive into your faith. We had a good Bible study, a good chapel group, and they really encouraged me in my faith journey. And I started to dive into Scripture a little bit more. Started to try to spend more time with Jesus, and ended up coming here after a couple of years. Wayno had convinced me to come to Increase Conference, and I think it was 2021. And I think throughout that whole time, my faith definitely grew way stronger during that time, and I started to feel that I actually had that personal relationship with Jesus. And then going back to this past year, I felt like my faith had kind of continued to grow up to that point. I had my birth of my first son helped as well. There's just something about that I feel like you can kind of just get a better sense of like what God's love for us is.
That's right.
We have I want the best for my son. I want all the best things in the world for him. So understanding that God wants the same for us. It kind of makes it a little bit easier to contextualize and understand that even though we might not be going through the best things right now, like an injury or something like that, just understanding that in the end, God wants the best for us. Not to say that God's gonna help everybody to win the World Series, but just knowing that regardless of what happens, it doesn't change our standing in His eyes, that He still loves us and has great plans.
Yeah.
So I think during that time when I was frustrated, it really helped me to understand that, and helped my faith for sure continue to grow and get like more of a sense of peace of what my life would be like if I didn't have baseball.
Yeah.
Well,
first of all, Wayno is going to be in the Hall of Faith, because that's all I keep hearing.
Yeah.
Is how he's invited so many people to the conference and stuff, and has been an impact. And I think that's important, the way he's impacted people in faith. And it kind of reminds me of what you just said about when you became a father. I know for me personally, when I became a father, it did change my understanding of God's love for us when I had my sons and daughters. And so in talking about that, how important is faith for you to obviously it to transcend the sport, but then also for you as a father to be a leader, the spiritual leader of the household, and to impart that on your children, but at the same time to develop, I guess, talk about developing your own faith, because I did the same thing. I grew up going to church, going to Bible study, Sunday school, all that stuff, but faith was really routine to me. It was more transactional with God, and it's not like that. It's not like what you said, I'm so obedient to God that He allowed me to win a World Series. It doesn't work like that. He cares, but He gives you these stages in order to glorify Him and point back to Him, right? And I think that's what's most important, is that we glorify God because He's placed us and given us the grace to be on a major stage through sports.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that was a kind of a big realization for me, was that there's no amount of works that I can do to earn His favor. I've already received God's grace, and then having that feeling makes me want to go out and do those good works, But yeah, I mean, that stage that you're talking about, I mean, that's a I've kind of realized over the past couple of years that that's a huge opportunity to set an example, obviously for my son, and then also all the young kids that are out there watching. To publicly declare my faith. I think I remember for myself, I watched guys like Tim Tebow. Like I watched him when I was in high school, and how open he was about my faith, and it was inspiring to me to be that open as well. And that's kind of going back to what I was talking about with Wayno. He was very open about his faith, and then to be in a clubhouse with him, and I saw not only was he like that, to the media and out in the open, but also like that in the clubhouse as well. So just having those two things intersect where you're the same person inside the clubhouse and out.
Yeah, you mentioned kids looking up to professional athletes and things like that. There's one guy that you're teammates with, and I know a ton of people look up to, Shohei Ohtani.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. What was that like? I guess being in the clubhouse with someone who is, idolized he's like the Michael Jordan of baseball.
Yeah.
How is that?
It's crazy. He's a one of a kind, and he had, I think, the best offensive season of all time, and that doesn't even include him pitching too. But I think what's cool about what Shohei is, he's so humble. He has no ego whatsoever, and he's works really hard. And it comes in with the same exact attitude. Always just like a happy guy. Always excited to see everybody. I think that's honestly probably a big reason. Like having those guys, Shohei, Freddie, Mookie, they're the same guys every day. And that I think having the leaders on your team who set that tone for the whole team, it allows you to have success. But yeah, I remember the first time I saw Shohei though, actually do something on the baseball field was I think it was the World Baseball when he was playing for Japan, and I saw him take batting practice, and it was like nothing I'd ever seen before. It looked like a golf ball coming off his bat, and he was hitting balls to places that I had no idea a human could even hit.
That's awesome.
But he's special for sure.
That's awesome. I had a question, I forgot it.
It's okay.
Yeah.
I got a question because I think, Tommy, as you think about going forward now, like you've achieved the top of the mountain as a baseball player, and it's like, oh, what else is there? I know you don't hit like full free agency for I think another year on your contract, and you're not even 30 years old yet. Like, what do you think about when you think about the future and just kind of trusting God and His plan, having like had the success you've had, but also like 6-8 months earlier, you didn't know. Like you were struggling with the injury and trying to figure out if you were going to come back or if you were even going to play. And the next thing you're winning a World Series, and now you have this whole, future ahead of you. How do you stay grounded in your faith with the Lord and not think too far ahead on like what's next and where am I going and what's this going to look like in 3, 4, 5 years? What's that look like?
Yeah. I think one way to look at it that I've actually heard, I forget who was, it might have been Nick Ahmed actually was saying this, how like every day like he wakes up with the purpose of trying to be a witness for Jesus.
Yeah.
And I think that comes back to just being present every day and understanding that we have a chance to make an impact with a lot of people out there, both fans, like people who are outside the clubhouse and within the locker room as well. I know we've talked a little bit about the locker room and stadium kind of components of PAO.
Yeah.
So you have a chance to make an impact in a lot of different ways, and I think that kind of helps us stay grounded. It can be easy in baseball, to look ahead to what's to come, whether that's free agency or even just like playoffs, World Series, that kind of thing. But we have a special chance every single day when you walk into the locker room to make an impact on one of your teammates.
Yeah,
and good. I need to do it. I'm not saying I'm good at that whatsoever, but I think now I do try to always remind myself that that's what's important. Is not necessarily performance and achievements, but the impact that we leave, and then the fact that we can share the gospel with any number of players on our team. So I think that's one way that we can stay grounded and just stay present. But I'm working on that every single day. I'm not good at it by any means.
Sure. Yeah. Were you a fantasy football player as a kid growing up?
I still am. I'm in.
Did you have? How many leagues are you in? Yeah.
I'm in 7.
Oh, that's a little
7 leagues.
Aggressive, isn't it?
I think you won me a couple championships.
I was just going to ask. Did Matt Forte help you with a few
for
titles
sure
there?
did. Yeah. There's no question that he did. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
I remember my question now is that being on a team full of stars, and you being one as well, how important is it, and how do you avoid comparison? Because that can be very easy to fall into a trap wise of what everybody else has, or trying to, I guess, selfishly ambition of having like I want to have that or attain. Like the appetite for it is more and more and more. So how do you avoid the comparison?
That's a tough one, you know. I think especially with baseball, when everything is just statistics, you know, stats and contracts, and then you have a lot of. I think now being on the Dodgers, like you got so many good players on the team, so it's something that I think I definitely have struggled with in the past, but I think almost just like thinking of ourselves as more of a team, you know, instead of like individuals, which is a lot easier to do when you get to the majors. I know coming up through the minors I think it's even more of an issue when you're in the minors. You know, you're competing with those guys who are in your same locker room to get called up to the majors, and you're trying to accumulate stats rather than trying to win baseball games. So I think getting back to like that team mindset helps with that. But I think regardless, you're always still going to kind of have those thoughts in the back of your mind, and the only way to truly not feel that comparison is just understanding your identity. You know, your identity isn't based on your stats or the back of your baseball card, but your identity is in Christ. You know, and we still, I think it's impossible to completely eliminate comparison from your mind, but I think always helping that be a reminder to yourself that the identity is not based on performance.
And Tommy, thank you for your time, man, and thanks for joining Sports Spectrum. We appreciate your witness.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Matt.
Yes, sir.
Hey, thanks for watching Sports Spectrum here on YouTube. You can click our next video, or you can check out our website, sportspectrum.com.